Hello, friends, and welcome back. Today, we're comparing 3 stories about entitled people who tried to take more than they deserved and ended up losing far more in return. One's about a friend who wanted free labor, another a pushy salesperson who wouldn't leave, and the last, neighbors who dumped trash and called the city. By the end, we'll see what really works when someone tries to push you around, and you get a vote in the comments. My friend thought my blacksmithing was a free gift service. This happened when I first started getting into blacksmithing, back when everything I made felt like a huge achievement and I was way too excited to show it off. I'd been spending weekends and late evenings in the shed, burning through scrap metal, learning by messing things up, and slowly figuring out how not to ruin everything I touched. I was proud of myself, honestly, so naturally I posted a few pictures and showed my friends some of the stuff I'd made. Most of them were supportive in a normal way. That's cool. Did you actually make that? That kind of thing. Then there was my entitled friend, EF. EF spots one picture and immediately zeroes in on a knife I'd made that had this gold-looking color. It was an aluminum bronze knife, not perfect by any stretch. I'd messed up the alloy ratio a little bit, so it wasn't as strong or as clean as it should have been. But for a beginner project, I was still pretty happy with it. EF goes, "Whoa, that golden knife looks sick. You think you could make one of those for me?" I didn't hesitate. I said, "Yeah, if you're willing to pay for it." That's when his tone changed instantly. "Why would I pay? I'm your mate, not a customer." I tried to explain it calmly. I told him that blacksmithing takes time, effort, and money. Fuel costs money, metal costs money, tools cost money, even the mistakes cost money. I wasn't running a charity forge out of my backyard. I couldn't just give stuff away every time someone thought something looked cool. He didn't like that at all. "Well then, how much would you even charge?" he asked, clearly expecting some ridiculous number so he could laugh it off. I thought about it and said, "Probably like 10 or 15 quid. It's a small knife and it wouldn't be perfect." He scoffed immediately. "That's way too overpriced for something that small. I could make that myself." So I shrugged and said, "All right, then make one." And that's when he cornered himself. "Well, I don't have the equipment to do it." I just looked at him and said, "Well, that's too bad then." EF didn't just want a free knife, he wanted you to agree that your work was worthless. By declaring he could make it himself, he tried to reduce your craft to a simple task. His follow-up excuse about equipment wasn't a realization, it was a confession. He understood the value perfectly, he just didn't want to pay it. He went quiet after that, proper sulk mode, didn't say much for the rest of the night, just sat there like I'd personally wronged him by not handing over a custom-made knife for free. The audacity was honestly impressive. What really got me was that later on, like nothing had happened, he actually asked me, "So, I'm not getting the knife then?" No apology, no offer to pay, just pure entitlement. I told him no, and that was the end of it. Nothing dramatic happened after that, no big blow-up, no revenge arc, no viral meltdown. Just a small but very clear lesson in how some people see your hobbies as free vending machines if you don't draw a line early. This all happened ages ago. I've since thrown out or lost a lot of my early work, including that knife. I don't blacksmith much anymore because life got busy. And honestly, I just don't have the time or energy for it these days. I'm pretty sure the photos are gone too. But yeah, that's my story. Not every entitled person flips a table. Sometimes they just sulk when they realize your time actually has value. And our second story. I demand to speak to the homeowner. For context, I'm a guy in my mid-30s. I live in the San Francisco Bay Area and the house I grew up in. My parents own the house, but I live by myself and they rarely come by. They've given me a lot of freedom to make the place my own. Nonetheless, even when they've told me to use my own judgment, I always make a point of running any decisions regarding home improvement projects by them, which is why I always tell anyone coming to the house trying to sell something that I'm not the homeowner. I have severe anxiety and hate unexpected visitors. I had a no soliciting sign on my front door, though I had to take it down when we replaced the door and painted the house about a month ago. I had yet to get a new one, though in this situation it wouldn't have mattered for reasons that will soon become apparent. For the most part, people were okay at obeying it, but I occasionally have the entitled D-bag who deliberately ignores it. Most of the time, when I tell them I'm not the homeowner, they're polite, give me their business card to give the homeowner before leaving. Last week, however, I came home opened the garage door and parked my car. I always back in, so the front of my car is facing the driveway, and was looking at something on my phone when a young woman, probably 18 or 19, walks into my garage and comes up to my car window. It startled me, and she began her interaction with me by apologizing for startling me and said, "Don't worry, I get startled all the time. I totally understand." Okay. I asked her what she wants. She says that she's not here to sell anything, but nonetheless wants to speak to the homeowners regarding solar panels. I forget exactly what she said, but it was something along the lines of wanting to get information for a brochure and our home was pre-approved or some crap like that. If you're confused, so was I. She gives me the usual, "Are you the homeowner?" I say no. She asks if they're here, and I say no. She asks when they'll be home. I tell her they don't live here. She asks if I'm a tenant, and I make the critical error of telling her that my parents are the homeowners, but they don't live here. She asks me if I can give her their contact info. I say no, but if she has a business card, I can give it to my parents, and they'll give her a call if they're interested in whatever service she's offering. She tells me she isn't offering any service. She just wants to consult with the homeowners. WTF. And again, demands that I give them their contact info. Again, I say no, but I can give them her contact info. She then launches into a tirade, saying something along the lines of, "Dude, I'm not the one who will be installing the panels. I'm not even from around here. I'm from Minnesota." I don't see how that's relevant, nor did I ever think she'd be the one installing the panels. I ask her who she's working for, if she's with a utility company. At one point, she asked if she could look at our electric meter, which she could easily do since it's right at the side of the house. And if she isn't there to sell anything, why is she here? She repeats the same confusing crap. She isn't there to sell anything, but is collecting information for a brochure about solar panels, and our house was pre-approved. And since I'm not the homeowner, could I give her their contact information? I tell her no, and that even if I gave her their information, they're just going to tell her the same thing that I'm saying, that we aren't interested. I ask if there's any way we can opt out of whatever she's there for. She says no, because there's nothing to opt out of. WTF. I try to see if she's wearing anything with her company logo on it. All I see is a lanyard with the Google logo on it. And if I remember correctly, it didn't even have a name tag or anything. She did tell me the name of the company she was supposedly working for when she first came up to me, but I don't remember what it was, as otherwise I'd look it up. At this point, I'm beginning to feel very uncomfortable. If the genders and ages were reversed, and I were a young woman sitting in my car in my own garage, and a 30-something guy came up to my car and demanded my contact info, I'm sure it would be highly frowned upon. I honestly think she was mentally ill. If she were at the front door, all I'd have to say is, "Sorry, not interested," and shut the door. But this crazy woman was in my garage, practically blocking me from getting out of my car, and I needed to find a way to make her leave. I tell her several times that I'm not going to give her my parents' contact information, but she can give me the name of whoever she works for, and I'll pass the information along to my parents. At this point, I'm more angry than anxious, and I'm fighting the urge to yell at her to get the F out of my garage, but I remained calm. After much back and forth, I finally got her to leave. However, as she was walking out, she said, "Someone else is going to come by your house later," and the way she said it honestly sounded like a threat. So far, nobody else has come by. I since have gotten a new no soliciting sign, which I put on the front door, but I have no idea how to deal with people who come up to me when I'm nowhere near the front door and refuse to leave. In hindsight, I should have told her she was trespassing and would call the police if she refused to leave, but I was so anxious for most of the altercation that I was at a loss for words. Update. Earlier today, I came home and saw that someone left one of those signs with an advertisement on it hanging from my front door handle, next to where I put my new no soliciting sign, which I don't mind because at least they didn't knock on the door. And even if they did, I wasn't home. I'm 95% sure it's the same company. I vaguely remember the entitled sales rep saying that the name of the company was Sonic. The reason why I'm not 100% sure is because the advertisement is about fiber optic internet and makes no mention of solar panels. So maybe because I was so agitated, I misremembered what the entitled sales rep was saying, aside from the fact that she wouldn't be doing the actual work. But everything else adds up. The advertisement says that the crews will be in the neighborhood installing their crap, and when it's complete, we'll have faster, more affordable internet. The advertisement says to scan the code to get the first month free, but the code is crossed out, and instead whoever left it wrote on the other side that they're offering 2 months free with me, and there's a name of a person, a woman, and a number. And no, I'm not going to call them. But that's not all. I looked them up on Yelp, and there's a review from someone detailing their experience with a pushy sales rep, and it sounds almost exactly like mine. There were a lot of positive reviews. It seems like the product itself is good, and most of the negative reviews are for their sales tactics and their customer service. The door hanger is phase 2. Her threat that someone else would come was real. It's their business model. They don't see a no soliciting sign. They see a challenge to overcome. Your resistance didn't remove you from the list. It flagged you for a second, more persistent approach. In any case, as I mentioned, I got a new no soliciting sign, and we, my parents and I, are probably going to have a Ring doorbell installed. In the future, I'm going to tell anyone who does this crap that I'm the homeowner and that they need to leave, and if they refuse, the cops will be called. The correct answer to her at that stage is, get the F off my property. If that fails, every answer should be, I want your name and your company phone number so I can call the cops about the intruder in my house. And our last story. Crazy neighbors called the city and learned a costly lesson. I don't know if ages really matter, but for context, I'm a 30-year-old woman living with my wife and our 2 sons. We're homeowners in a quiet residential area, the kind of place where most people wave politely, keep to themselves, and generally don't cause problems. We've never been the type to peer over fences or monitor what our neighbors are doing in their yards. We mind our business, take care of our place, and expect the same courtesy in return. That changed when the fence between our property and the neighbor's yard literally collapsed. At first, we didn't even realize what had caused it. One afternoon, I was outside with the kids when I noticed a section of fence leaning at an odd angle. When I walked closer, I saw the panels had cracked and bowed inward. And then I saw what was on the other side. The neighbors had been stacking garbage directly against our fence. Not yard waste, not neatly piled lumber, actual trash. Old furniture pieces, broken wood, twisted metal, bulging garbage bags, and random debris stacked so high and so close that the pressure eventually snapped the fence and dumped half of it into our yard. Our yard where my kids play. I was furious, but I tried to handle it calmly. I went next door and knocked. The husband answered, and I explained what happened. I showed him the broken fence and the trash that had spilled onto our side. I told him we needed the garbage cleared and that it would be fair for them to help cover the cost of repairing the fence since their trash caused the damage. He nodded along, said something like, yeah, I'll take care of it, and that was that. 2 weeks passed, nothing changed. The trash stayed exactly where it was, still leaning against the fence, still partially in our yard. I knocked again. This time the wife answered, holding their baby. She sighed dramatically and told me the baby had been a lot lately and that things were hectic, but she promised they'd deal with the garbage as soon as possible. I told her I understood having a baby was stressful, but this had already gone on long enough, and it was a safety issue for our kids. 3 more weeks passed, still nothing. At that point, I stopped trying to be face-to-face polite. I knocked again at different times of day, no answer. I rang their doorbell camera and left messages. I sent polite messages on Facebook, both to her and her husband, explaining again that the trash needed to be removed and the fence addressed. Complete silence. They were clearly home at times, but they ignored everything. By then, more than a month had gone by with broken fence panels and piles of junk sitting in our yard. My kids couldn't use that part of the yard safely. I was stepping over sharp metal and splintered wood every time I went near the fence line. And at that point, I honestly stopped caring whether they contributed money or not. I just wanted the mess gone, so I handled it. One Saturday, I loaded all of their trash that had spilled into our yard and everything that was still leaning against our fence into my car, multiple trips. I drove it all straight to the dump and paid the disposal fees myself. I took photos before and after just in case. When I was done, our yard was finally clear. The fence was still broken, but at least there wasn't garbage rotting against it anymore. They noticed almost immediately. The wife showed up at our door that evening, furious. She started yelling before I even fully opened the door, demanding to know where her property had gone. I told her calmly that the trash had been removed and disposed of after being left on our property for over a month. she lost it. She started accusing me of theft, saying I had no right to touch their belongings and that they were still planning to deal with it. I told her if it was so important, it shouldn't have been dumped into my yard and left there while being ignored for weeks. She threatened small claims court and said we owed them money for the items I threw away. At that point, I snapped and called her a Karen. I told her my kids' safety mattered more than her pile of broken junk. She went off about how the nearest dump was over an hour away, how they didn't have time for this, and how unfair I was being. I told her that it was not my problem and closed the door. What she didn't expect was what happened next. A few days later, I got a visit from city code enforcement. Apparently, the neighbors had called to report us for illegally disposing of their property and damaging shared fencing. I invited the officer into our backyard and showed him everything. The broken fence, the photos of the trash leaning against it, the messages I'd sent asking them to clean it up, the timeline, the fact that the garbage had been stored improperly and illegally along the property line. The officer was not impressed. He went next door after leaving our place. Less than an hour later, he came back to let us know that the neighbors were being cited for improper waste storage, illegal dumping, and damage to adjoining property. They were given a fine and a deadline to clean up the rest of the yard. They were also informed that they were responsible for repairing or replacing the damaged fence since it was clear their trash caused the collapse. That wasn't the end of it. Apparently, once code enforcement took a closer look, they found more violations in their backyard that had nothing to do with us. More junk piles, unsafe storage, things that absolutely should not have been there with a baby in the house. The fines stacked up quickly, and when they failed to meet the cleanup deadline, the city hired a contractor to clear the yard and bill the neighbors for their service. Calling code enforcement was their first mistake. They thought they were reporting you, but they were really inviting an audit of their own property. The officer didn't just see your clean yard, he saw the source, and the law followed the evidence right back to their door. A week later, we received a message from the husband. Not an apology, but a very stiff, very formal note saying they would handle the fence repairs. True to his word, a fencing company showed up the following week and replaced the damaged panels at no cost to us. Since then, they don't speak to us, no waving, no eye contact. The wife avoids us entirely. And honestly, that's fine by me. Our yard's clean, our fence is fixed, our kids can play safely again. And the neighbors learned the hard way that dumping garbage onto someone else's property and ignoring them for weeks doesn't end well. Each story's about someone trying to take something without giving anything in return. Free labor, forced contact, shared property. In every case, the person being pressured didn't escalate emotionally. They held their ground and let reality enforce the consequences. Whether it was saying make it yourself, documenting trespassing, or letting code enforcement do an inspection, the real win came from refusing to play by the entitled person's rules. Which response do you think was the most effective? Vote in the comments. Story 1, 2, or 3. And thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.